A big thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Quick disclaimer, everything in this video and all of my videos are my opinion based on detailed research that I perform. That said, I would recommend doing your own research before you make up your mind. Thank you. The Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation trial has brought to light so many details pertaining to their relationship. It is entirely fair to say that it was beyond unhealthy. Fights that went on for days, punches, kicks, and scratches, injuries and blood on the walls, destroyed apartments, and not to mention literally human excrement on the bed. Excrement aside, I think there are aspects of Johnny and Amber's relationship that everyone experiences. As hard as these relationships are, they seem to be even harder to leave. And that was definitely the case for Johnny Depp. So in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into their relationship and break down the various factors that made it not only disastrous, but torturously hard to end. The best place to start is with the very crucial diagnosis that the psychologist Dr. Curry made of Amber Heard. Dr. Curry performed an in-person evaluation and administered DSM-5 approved tests that allowed her to reach her diagnosis. I'm going to show you various excerpts from her testimony where she explains in detail what conclusions she was able to arrive at.
The results of Ms. Heard's evaluation supported two diagnoses: borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. There were a couple of characteristics that she noted in her self-report that were consistent with these personality disorders. The first was actually my own behavioral observations of her based on her self-report. So one of the hallmark characteristics of histrionic personality disorder is sort of a overly dramatic presentation. We call this impressionistic speech. So it tends to be very flowery. It uses a lot of descriptive words like magical, wonderful, and it can go on for quite some time, and yet it really lacks any substance. So at the end, you're left wondering what was just said or what the answer is to the actual question. So that occurred a number of times, and it also represented the quick shifts you'll see between emotions. So she would suddenly be one way, and then she would become very animated or very sad. And when people are displaying these emotions with this personality disorder, there's a sense of shallowness to it. People who are observing them will feel like it's almost play acting, and they might not be able to put their finger on it. But part of it is because of the rapidness with which the person can switch emotions, and also the lack of substance. They don't really refer to, I feel this way. They might describe emotions, they might describe events, but very rarely, and Ms. Heard did not say, I feel vulnerable. She never really indicated a vulnerable feeling of her own.
This is a good spot to pause real quick because I want to talk about a product I use every day. I generally spend a lot of time working from cafes, especially when I'm writing for baggage claim, because I feel more productive when I'm around other people rather than just being this loner at home. But I hate that my data is at risk since I have to connect to a public non-secure Wi-Fi. That's why I use NordVPN to protect my data. Now, a VPN sounds complicated, but literally it's a one-click activation and boom, it blocks intrusive ads, any web trackers, and helps avoid online spies and stalkers. And of course, for my videos, I'm constantly downloading a ton of content, and NordVPN automatically scans URLs and blocks anything malicious, including malware. But I haven't even told you the best bit yet. I watch The Office religiously. It's my go-to feel-good TV in the background any day, but it's not available on Netflix in the US anymore. So guess what I use to watch it? With NordVPN, I can connect to a server in over 60 countries, and it's like I'm browsing from that country. I also like to see what's trending on Netflix in places like India, Australia, or the UK, so that I can get some international recommendations. Geez, I just need to move to the UK already. So if you're interested in learning more, use my link nordvpn.com/baggageclaim to get the exclusive NordVPN deal. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Really appreciate you listening to this portion, since sponsorships really help me stay working full-time on this channel. So thank you so much. Okay, and back to the video.
One of the primary things I learned was that she had a very sophisticated way of minimizing any personal problems. Some of the primary characteristics, and I'm going to try to condense 25 pages here, were essentially externalization of blame, tending to have a lot of inner hostility that is attempted to be controlled, a tendency to be very self-righteous, but to also deny that self-righteousness and to judge others critically against these sort of high standards for moral value, but also to deny doing that, essentially to claim that one is very non-judgmental and accepting, and yet very full of rage, really. And these aren't facts, but her scores essentially correlated. So they were consistent with other people who obtained these scores who have been shown through many, many, many studies to have these very specific traits. So externalization of blame, a lot of inner anger and hostility. Sometimes that anger among these groups with similar scores, these people might have that anger kind of explode out at times. They tend to be very passive aggressive. They may be self-indulgent, very self-centered. They could use manipulation tactics to try to get their needs met, very needy of attention, acceptance, approval. They tend to distance people who are close to them. Initially, they may seem very charming. They're very socially sophisticated, actually. That was a major component on there. They have a capacity to kind of offer some of their faults, but in a way, but only the ones that people think of lightly and can all relate to. And so they can present as very fair and balanced, but in actuality, they really might be very judgmental of others and unaware of problems in their behavior and their thinking.
What characteristics are associated with a 3-6 code type?
So a 3-6 code type, a lot of that anger is expressed in this code type. There can be actually a lot of cruelty, usually with people who are less powerful. Actually, when you see this code type, you want to, if you can, to follow up with subordinates, coworkers, people who may have observed their behavior more closely. The 3-6 code type is very concerned with their image, very attention-seeking, very prone to externalizing blame to a point where it's unclear whether they can even admit to themselves that they do have responsibility in certain areas. A lot of suppressed and denied anger, but the anger is very present, will explode out, and a lot of issues in their close relationships. So borderline personality disorder is a disorder of stability. It's instability, and it's instability in personal relationships, it's instability in their emotions, it's instability in their behavior, and it's instability in their sense of self and their identity. And that instability is really driven by this underlying terror of abandonment. But when somebody is afraid of being abandoned by their partner or by anybody else in their environment and they have this disorder, they'll make desperate attempts to prevent that from happening. And those desperate attempts could be physical aggression, it could be threatening, it could be harming themselves. But these are behaviors that are usually very extreme and very concerning to the people around them. Sadly, it's counteractive, right? So the thing these people fear most is being abandoned, but over time, the anger, the explosive anger that they show when somebody is needing space, or when somebody's really not doing anything wrong, because a lot of times they read into things that they perceive as being a slight to them or being somebody intending to harm them that actually isn't happening. They'll exaggerate it, and they'll explode. They'll react in this heightened manner that is just exhausting for their partners. Oftentimes, their partners will try to make them happy at first and really allow themselves to be a punching bag, thinking that they can somehow solve this problem, that somehow they can make this better. And eventually it just overwhelms them. People with borderline personality disorder can be very caring in their relationships as long as their needs are being met. They feel that their needs should be met when they want them met at a specific level. And if they're not, then that anger, that sense of harm, causes them to react. So histrionic personality disorder, and these are really two sides of the same coin. They belong to the same cluster. We call these clusters. It's a way to organize personality disorders in that DSM. And this cluster is described as the personality disorders that are dramatic, erratic, and emotional. Okay, so unpredictable, but really having to do with emotions and relationships. They're very similar. Whereas I was saying that borderline personality disorder, a lot of the key features that you're going to notice are instability. When it comes to histrionic, a lot of the key features are going to be drama and shallowness. Similarly, with borderline personality disorder, there's this underlying drive of avoiding abandonment. With histrionic personality disorder, that underlying drive is to always be the center of attention. Because if you don't have that attention on you, it feels similarly to borderline personality disorder. You feel pretty empty, like you don't have that sense of being or of value. So again, that instability also travels toward identity. When I was describing personality earlier, I was talking a little bit about those traits we have that help us know who we are. When you have borderline personality disorder, that actually is not something you understand. So People with this disorder actually take on the identity of the people they're spending time with because it's comforting. It's very uncomfortable to not know who you are. Some people with this disorder will describe a feeling of emptiness when they feel like they've been abandoned because now they don't know who they are in the world. And so when somebody with this disorder is going through that initial enmeshment phase with new people and they're idealizing them, they often will take on the identities of those people. So they may mimic them in a lot of ways. They might mimic the way they dress, their interests, the way they talk.
So I know that was a lot to watch, but let's summarize the major points, which are that Amber Heard suffers from borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. She is hypercritical, but herself unable to accept any criticism, is filled with rage, and has a terror of abandonment. She also deeply struggles with instability of emotions, of behavior, and most importantly, her sense of self and identity. This explains how Johnny Depp felt about Amber in the beginning of their relationship.
In the beginning of my relationship with Miss Heard, from what I recall and what I remember, she was it was as if she was too good to be true. She was attentive, she was loving, she was smart, she was kind, she was funny, she was understanding, and we had many things in common, certain blues music and music, literature, things of that nature. So for that year or year and a half, it was amazing. There were a couple of things that, I don't know, stuck in my head that I noticed that I thought might be a little bit of a dilemma at some point.
And the reason things seem to reveal themselves is because as the relationship progresses and they leave the honeymoon phase, the true aspects of a person's personality start to come out, especially as they feel threatened. One of Amber's traits that became more and more obvious over time was her tendency to be overly critical. During his testimony, Johnny Depp talked about his struggle to accept the rise in the amount of criticism he was facing. Suddenly, it seemed like he couldn't do anything right. And he realized that he was in a relationship with someone as overly critical and cruel like his mother.
It was a sort of a rapid fire, sort of endless parade of insults and looking at me like I was a fool. And I just couldn't, I was having difficulty in my mind, of course, and in my heart, dealing with that sort of barrage. It was astounding how wrong I was about everything that I've experienced within the film industry, or in just life itself. I was sort of not allowed to be right, not allowed to have a voice. So at a certain point, when what enters your mind is, you start to slowly realize that you are in a relationship with your mother, in a sense.
The hard part of experiencing something like this at the hands of your significant other is that the intense criticism starts to seep in, since a reasonable person is willing to hear where they have done something wrong. Amber has a high standard that everyone has to live up to, but it's a high standard that is so unreasonable that even she herself cannot abide by it. But in her mind, in the times she can't live up to the standard, she is justified. And when Johnny can't live up to it, he's a monster. Since Amber is full of rage, as Dr. Curry explained, and as we can hear in the recordings, the criticism snowballs into long fights that are incredibly cruel, with Amber criticizing every aspect of Johnny, including his abilities as a father, often calling him a bad father. Hand in hand with her desire to criticize is Amber's inability to accept any blame. So when Johnny tries to show her that her behavior is terrible, she refuses to accept any responsibility. He even resorts to recording their conversations just so that he has something to reference to and not feel crazy. This relates to a tool that people often talk about called gaslighting, where a narcissist will make you question your reality, often as a way to avoid blame in any situation. Being able to accept blame and see all the ways that you are able to hurt someone is a crucial part of being a healthy human being. This ability allows you to discern reasonable criticism and change your behavior to create a better relationship with friends, family, and your significant other. An inability to do that To always default to, no, the fault lies with someone else, means you never change. You never grow. And if you can't grow, that means you never develop into a properly functioning person capable of loving other people in a healthy way. Your relationships eventually rot, disintegrate, and people, friends, husbands, wives eventually leave. But the leaving is very hard to do in Johnny's case. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to fail at yet another relationship.
But why did I stay? I stayed, I suppose, because my father stayed. I suppose because I had been in that relationship with Vanessa, and that was lost, and I didn't want to fail. I wanted to try to make it work. I thought maybe I could help her. I thought maybe I could bring her around, because the Amber Heard that I knew for the first year and a half was not this suddenly this opponent.
He believed he could negotiate with Amber and that he could keep her happy and help her. Johnny thought that if he could keep her happy, he could then prevent their relationship from constantly devolving into the long, cruel fights. This is a common tactic that people will try to use in the relationships with people who struggle with stable emotions. The tactic is to try to appease them, make them feel loved, make them feel whole, so that they don't have to resort to fights. But there are two problems with this strategy. Number one, seemingly innocuous, harmless things would set Amber off. And number two, Amber suffered from intense rage. As Dr. Curry had explained in her testimony, Amber wanted to fight because it served as a constant outlet for her emotions, which could be easily destabilized by something as simple as Johnny Depp wanting to go spend time with his daughter. But the issue here was that when things got to be too much, which they often did due to Amber's rage and emotions, Johnny's strategy of dealing with difficult situations was to run, to get distance, and to numb himself using drugs and alcohol. These were responses that he had developed that helped him cope with the mental, verbal, and physical abuse he had suffered at the hands of his mother as a child. But Amber, suffering from a major fear of abandonment, felt very threatened by his desire for space. So she didn't let him leave.
In Australia, when we had the big fight where I lost the tip of my finger, at least 5 bathrooms and 2 bedrooms I went to
avoid talking to me, to
to
avoid
escape
working it out. That's
to
the
escape
problem.
the fight.
You don't escape the fight. You escape the solution.
No.
You escape the solution.
No.
You escape figuring it out. We cannot work it out if you run away to the bathroom every time.
Listen to me. The argument just keeps mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting. You can go into the bathroom and sit on the floor. Bam, 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 here you come. I come out. Fight, crazy, escalated. I split again, I go to another bathroom or a bedroom or something. Knock, 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 bang, bang, bang. You kept coming to get me.
She locked him in, she beat him down, she chased him from room to room, throwing pots, pans, bottles, banging down the door, all to maintain her feeling of control over him, all to keep him from seemingly abandoning her. And the fights were unending, with Johnny being continually criticized, with Amber taunting him incessantly, all while refusing to accept her part in the problems. When Johnny would try to extricate himself from the fights, she would not let him physically leave to get distance, and he would not let himself mentally leave the relationship because of his desire to make it work. He bargained with her as much as possible, recording her so she could hear what she was doing. He tried to get her to see the consequences of her behavior. When he would come to almost walking away, she would agree to change, but then revert back to her old ways. A person can go mad in a situation like this, pushed to their utter limits, and yet unable and unwilling to escape the environment. So what got Johnny Depp to finally leave? Starting from March 2015 through 2016, Johnny experienced some major difficulties. For one thing, he lost the tip of his finger when Amber threw a bottle at his hand. This was after an already long fight that the two had in Australia, because Johnny had asked Amber for a post-nup agreement. And just imagine it, distraught and experiencing what seemed like a nervous breakdown, Johnny Depp went around the house writing messages on the walls in his own blood. When he was finally carted away to the hospital, Amber put out a cigarette on his face. Johnny went on to contract an infection in that finger and underwent several painful surgeries. While his finger was still healing from the injury and infection, Amber punched him right in the face during an altercation. In 2016, Johnny Depp discovered his business managers had stolen millions of dollars from him. Having just heard this news and still processing what the consequences of such a loss would be, Amber started punching him for being late to her birthday party. Finally sick of this treatment, Johnny decided to leave the apartment and get some space. A few days later, when he decided to come back to grab his things, he found out that she had left feces on the side of his bed. We're just gonna move on from that one. The final straw, however, was not that, but rather when his mom passed away a month later. It was the catalyst to finally getting out of this hellish relationship. And this is true for a lot of toxic relationships. You often have to be pushed completely to the brink, hit far below what you ever perceived was your rock bottom, to finally agree that you need to get out. Johnny's mother had been the first woman to abuse him, the one who taught him to accept the criticisms, to be silent in the wake of the onslaught, and instead of hating her, he had found a way to love and accept her for whatever she was, since she didn't know better.
And what were some of those things that your mother's death opened your eyes to?
That life is a birdsong. That what feels like 100 years is in fact a second, millisecond. Nobody can count those things. So I had made peace with Betty Sue because I understood where she came from, and I understood how difficult her childhood was, and I understood that she had not had the proper training or proper teaching or the proper background to be anything other than what she had been when we were younger. I forgave her for all that, as one should.
But years after leaving her house and building a stable, loving family for himself, he had somehow allowed all of that to slide away to be replaced by yet another cruel woman, hell-bent on controlling and demeaning him. But even after all that he had endured during their relationship, he told Amber that he loved her and that he wanted to make this divorce as easy as possible for her. But little did he know that this would only be the beginning of what cruelty she was truly capable of. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.